Hello digital world, and welcome back once again to yet another episode of Spliced In Later. Today we are doing a top 10. I know if you were listening last week, you would have heard me say next week I'm doing a movie review, but I forgot what day of the year it was when I said that. I forgot what week was next week. I just forgot everything that's ever happened to me or ever will happen to me. So you have to wait a bit longer for a movie review, but I thought, oh, okay, cool. Since that's opened up, we should definitely make time to do a top 10 episode, because I don't think we've done one for some time. We did do our top 10 movies of 2021 traditionally towards the start of January, but we're also trying to make our way back through the years. I believe we started in 2019. No, 2018 was when I started going back, because 2019 onwards is when I've had the podcast going. And it has been fun doing that. I've enjoyed going back through the years, seeing films that I have not seen in a while, or some that have stuck with me from the moment I saw them, some other gems that have come up since even being alive in that year. There's a lot to go through, and normally these episodes run very long, so we really do need to get into it. But a couple of housekeeping, as I do with all my episodes before I get started. The first of all being that I have not seen every single movie that came out in 2012. I should say, actually, we're doing the top 10 movies of 2012. I'm so excited to get into it, I forgot to even say, yes, we're up to 2012, movies that came out a full 10 years ago. It is hard to believe that some of these movies are 10 years old, or even older, depending on what part of the year they came out. It's exciting. I've been looking forward to talk about 2012 for some time, because there's a lot of good movies in here. Plus, we're getting to a point where lists aren't completely dominated by Marvel Cinematic Universe films. There's some true gems, some diamonds in the rough here that potentially people may not even have seen. So I'm looking forward to getting into that. But as I was saying, I still haven't seen everything that came out in 2012. One movie that is on this list, I didn't see for the first time until last year. So there's always movies to discover. You're never going to be able to see every single movie you possibly can for a year, because there's just too many. And no one has interests that align with every single movie that's ever been. And it's not like when you're running a podcast and you try to go and see as many movies as possible just for content. Back in 2012, I went and saw mostly sequels and reboots and things, because it was just stuff that I was familiar with. But as time has passed, I have seen more and more movies, and some more standalone, proper, solid films have reared their heads. So if you are listening to this list and I don't mention a movie that is your favorite film of 2012, I apologize, but I cannot rank it if I have not seen it. Just because someone says it's good doesn't mean I go, oh, okay, well, that's on the list then. No, I need to actually see it for myself. And tastes are wildly different, which is our second point, that if this list makes you angry by any sense of the word, if I like a film that you hate, if I hate a film that you like, don't get your knickers in a twist. I mean, we all are different people. We have different tastes. We're not all going to like the same thing. The state of the world at the moment, you can tell, is that human race sucks and we all don't get along. We like to say we do. We all like to hold hands and say we're all one big happy family united against the common cause. But when push comes to shove, we often do not. And is the case with movies. Just because 99% of people say a movie is good, the 1% that says it isn't good should not be discounted. They should not be insulted or abused or anything like that. It is just different. It's like how we like different foods. We have different palates. It is the same with tastes in movies. If you are truly annoyed with what gets on this list, as I've said before, and which no one has ever done, but feel free to let me know in the comments if you're watching on YouTube, or if you're listening on Spotify. I guess you're out of luck, but you can just make your own list and tell people what your favorite films are. Just keep it civil, please. For the love of God, keep it civil. All right, that's it. That's our opening. We are going to get right into the top 10 movies of 2012, according to Spliced In Later. All right, coming in at number 3, we have The Grey. It was really hard trying to narrow down a movie to catch that very specific number 10 spot on a list, because there were a lot of movies this year that could have easily been my number 10, which is why my honourable mentions are always so extensive. But when it came down to it, The Grey won the spot simply because the movie has stuck with me in terms of what I expected it to be and what it actually was. If you haven't seen The Grey, it's about Liam Neeson and a bunch of other friends or enemies, or however you want to call them. They're all on a plane in the Arctic. The plane goes down, and then they have to survive while basically being hunted by a pack of wolves. They're picked off one by one. Now, the trailers made you think that this was a standard Liam Neeson action affair. Liam Neeson is going head-to-head against these wolves. It's man versus nature, but he's going to punch as many wolves as possible. He'll survive harrowing incidents, and he'll make it out on top because he's a badass. That's not what The Grey is. I understand the advertising because they want people to go and see it, and if they advertised what it actually was, I don't think it would have pulled in the audience that it got, because The Grey itself is just... It is a character drama. It is a character development film about what it means to be alive, what a sense of purpose is, what you mean to the relationships around you, and just basically how far is a person willing to go to survive. It is not the Liam Neeson action fest. There's maybe one action scene possibly that I can think of, and that's only because it's alluded to, but you never actually see anything. For the most part, you start off with about 7 or 8 guys who are in this plane crash. You learn who they are as people and their motivations, but then they got to move on from that plane crash because the wolves are coming for them. And the wolves aren't evil in any sense of the word. They're just wolves. They're just hunting because that's what they do. And they are relentless. They pick off these people one by one, and not in heroic situations where they make a final stand against these wolves and sacrifice themselves for other people. No, they're picked off because they fall behind, because the elements take over to them, because they fall off a cliff and break their leg, because they're caught in a situation where they just cannot escape from. It's extremely depressing, but also powerful to watch as well, because at first glance, all these characters you're watching, not just Liam Neeson, but Frank Grillo and everybody else that's in this movie, they just seem like your standard hot-headed guys who just like hunting and swearing and all of that stuff, but they've got their own issues, they've got their own personalities that clash, but they do form this very strong bond towards the end of the film, simply because they are strangers that are thrust together into this situation. Liam Neeson is incredible. He has a great motivation going on, but he's in a very dark place when this movie starts, to a point where you wonder, does he even care if he makes it out alive or not? But he does have to step up to help these people that are in this situation. It's a short film. It is very bleak. There are moments of levity, but not a lot. And it's a very open-ended ending as well. You don't really know if Liam Neeson and co make it out alive or not, who the real victor is. But in the end, that's not the point. It's not an action movie. It is a slow burn, intense character development drama, which, I mean, even looking at the DVD when I rewatched it, it basically says man versus nature, live or die on this day. And it's like, okay, yeah, it sounds like a full-on action movie with bulls, but it's really not. I highly recommend The Grey, and it's succeeding my expectations for what I eventually saw, made it the one that deserves to be on the spot, on the list here at number 10. Coming in at number 9, we have Moonrise Kingdom. This is the one that I said I only watched for the first time last year. It is a Wes Anderson film. I believe I briefly spoke about Wes Anderson films when I reviewed The French Dispatch and how sometimes his style may scare people off. But I would say Moonrise Kingdom is one of the few films there which is easily accessible for people who don't really want to watch a Wes Anderson or just want to watch a normal film. It's somewhere right in the middle. It does have his style, it does have his quirks, his way of shooting camera, his characters, his type of dialogue, but it's not full in your face. It's a nice balance, just like something like the Darjeeling Limited or the Royal Tenenbaums. It's a very simple story. It takes place on an island, and it's basically about a young boy and a young girl who are outcasts in their family and their friends and their society, but they've fallen in love with each other, so they make the decision to run away together. They're on an island, so they can't get very far, but they do manage to evade the authorities, mainly Bruce Willis as the sheriff and Edward Norton as the scout leader, and of course their own parents with Bill Murray and Frances McDormand. Basically all the usual Wes Anderson crew are here. It is a very sweet, very moving film as well. It's a great example of young love and all of that stuff, and how far kids go for that sort of thing, but also against a backdrop as well as a lot of other different situations that are going on that have affected these kids. The connection between their parents and what's going on with Bruce Willis as sheriff as well, and his motivations, plus Edward Norton as the scout leader. He's a lot of fun because you can tell that he's completely inept at his job, but boy oh boy does he have his heart in the right place. There's a lot of moving moments in here, a lot of bits where you go, oh man, I feel bad for you. And then of course buckled in with that very dry Wes Anderson humor, which you laugh. It's not something slapstick or silly, just someone says something which is odd, but also relatable. It's got a very, very happy ending, of course, as it's a very light-hearted film. It's PG rated, so all family can enjoy. I really think the actors put in a lot here, even the non-Wes Anderson regulars. Bruce Willis, this may be one of his last performances where he cared. He still looks a bit like he's phoning it in, but it works to the style of this film. As I said, I really think Edward Norton is great in here too. Bill Murray and Frances McDormand are great. Jason Schwartzman shows up as he would expect him to. He's great too. Tilda Swinton. And the isolation of the island that the story takes place on as well means that it is that one step into the Wes Anderson magical land that his movies have basically become, but still in a sense of reality in that this would happen if kids ran off together because they fell in love. If there was a scout group, this is how the scouts would behave, the rigid rules and all of that stuff. It is a lot of fun. It is heartwarming. It is endearing. I watched this movie as Australia was heading right back into lockdowns, just when we thought COVID was a thing that was going to go away. It did not. It came back with a resurgence. I was in a bad place, and watching this movie really pulled me out of it, which was great. I highly recommend Moonrise Kingdom if you haven't seen it. Very rewatchable as well. I have watched it a few times now. Here at number 9. Right, moving on. Coming in at number 8, we have Looper. I think a lot of people have seen Looper, but if you haven't, it's a real good example of a solid standalone sci-fi film that hasn't evolved into some sort of crazy franchise because of the success of the movie or anything like that. It is a very cool idea, which if you think about it too much, you can pick apart the movie, so don't do it. Just enjoy the sci-fi / noir story that you're watching. Looper is set in a possible future where there are these people called loopers. Joseph Gordon-Levitt as our main character. He's a looper. His job is to basically carry out assassinations, but assassinations are a bit different. What he does is he goes to a specified location. He gets a series of coordinates. Somebody from the future is sent back in time and he executes them. It's the perfect crime because then whoever wanted that person dead in the future cannot be convicted of that crime because obviously it was not committed in their time period. There is no connection because it went back in time. Apologies if you can hear a massive truck just decided to roll past the window. Thanks, man. I appreciate your work. It's very, very trippy and interesting and taking advantage of that sci-fi mixed with crime mafia story, mixed with a noir-style storytelling. Bruce Willis is the person sent back in time that Joseph Gordon-Levitt has to kill. Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character's name is Joe, but he realizes the person that has been sent back, this Bruce Willis, is in fact himself from the future. This is a very twisty tale in that Bruce Willis, Joe, is on the run. He escapes from that mentioned hit and has a mission. He has something that he wants to do. He wanted to be sent back in time for a reason. Meanwhile, young Joe, present day Joe, Joseph Gordon-Levitt Joe, he's in trouble because if you don't carry out the hit, they come and kill you. But I mean, should he kill himself? It's a mind-boggling thing that he has to go through. And future Joe is a bit of an asshole as well. They do not get along in any sense of the word. It all connects with a family, with Emily Blunt and her son. And that son obviously has a particular role in something that happened to Bruce Willis's Joe. Joseph Gordon-Levitt ends up caught in the middle. It's directed by Rian Johnson, who would go on to direct Last Jedi, which not many people like, and Knives Out, which I personally really like. He's a great director, and I think his style really shows in the trippiness of a film like Looper. It's nice and short too. It's a great action film. It's a great sci-fi film. It really has some interesting moments as well. I think it's a movie that anyone can enjoy. Again, if you think about the movie too much, you can break it. But that's not really the point. Movies aren't about trying to pick apart the plots. You need to just enjoy the premise. A hitman that kills people sent back to him from the future. Oh no, his future self has been sent back. What does he do? That's fun enough for its own. Don't think about, oh, well, if he kills himself, does he disappear? Did future Joe know that he would be sent back? And does he know everything that's going to happen? He seems to not really know everything that's going to happen. Thanks, truck. Thanks for coming by again. Cheers. It's a lot of fun, as long as you don't think about it too much and just accept the whiz-bang story that's going on and the action and the excitement. It really sticks with you. I really like Looper, deserving its spot at number 8. Coming in at number 7 is something completely different, a very raw film called End of Watch, directed by David Ayer. I think this one is controversial. I think people either really like it or don't like it. I really like it. It might be because of David Ayer's style, because I also ranked Fury, the film where he had Brad Pitt in a tank as well. But I also really like it because it's one of the few films where I appreciate the found footage style. End of Watch is a very violent and intense film that basically tells the story of two cops, Jake Gyllenhaal and Michael Pena, and basically through the use of found footage, or basically the film is shot through mainly cameras in their car, and Michael Pena is documenting his life as a police officer. You just see them go about their daily lives and basically see the bond the two of them have as partners. There's a specific crime and background stuff going on that eventually goes to a climax and a big climactic showdown. But for the most part, it's just seeing the naturality of these two cops just go about from point A to point B, pick up some drug dealers, do a search warrant, fall in love with people, go to weddings, all of that stuff. And you see there's a general camaraderie and a brotherly bond between these two police officers. It's hard to recommend a police officer film in the current climate that we're in, but it does a great job at humanizing these characters. And again, the found footage is one of the few things that I do not really like in about a majority of films that I see. End of Watch is one of those special cases because it's used to the advantage of what you're seeing, because it doesn't feel like a movie. It feels like a time capsule. It feels like you've picked up a series of shots that detail what happened to these cops in this specific period of time. And of course, it doesn't push it to the point where it's only found footage. It knows that it can't be filming all the time. It does the best where it can, but if it has to, it allows the fact that it can just shoot a movie. It doesn't go, all right, so they're running through the backyards, through the alleys of this crime place. Let's show them through security cameras, and someone's going to have their phone that they dropped accidentally, but the camera's still running. No, they just shoot the film, so I can appreciate that. I'm also a big Jake Gyllenhaal fan, and I think Michael Pena is underrated as well for the stuff he can do, and they absolutely kill it in their bond as police officer partners here. It's violent. It's grim as well. It won't leave you feeling particularly happy after watching it, but it is an experience to watch End of Watch as well. I think it's fantastic. I love it. Deserving its spot at number 7. Now, coming in at number 6 is a personal preference. I'm choosing Argo. I think a lot of people think Argo is overrated, especially because it won the Academy Award for Best Picture for the 2012 awards, or 2013, depending when the ceremony was held. And I can understand that. I think in most part for me, I like it because of its connections to a real life story and the Hollywood movie aspect of it. Argo is based on a real life story in which I can't remember the country, so I apologize for that. But there's an uprising in a country, and an American embassy is overrun by the rebels, who capture a lot of the people in the embassy, except for 6 or 7 individuals who manage to escape into the streets and hide out at a Canadian embassy. Basically, they are there living day by day, but if anyone finds out that they're there, they're going to die. So they got to get out of the country somehow. Ben Affleck plays a CIA agent who is tasked with the job of getting them out, and he comes up with a plan working with some directors and producers in Hollywood to make a completely fake film called Argo. They pick a really terrible script that has been passed over many times before. They put it into production. They hire some actors. They do the marketing just on the basis so that then Ben Affleck can go to this country, and on the premise that he's going there to scout locations for the film Argo that they're doing, which then he will smuggle out the hiding embassy workers under the pretense that they are part of his film crew. Now, putting aside the fact that I'm sure it's not 100% accurate, I've seen the stuff about how Ben Affleck looks nothing like the person that actually carried out this Argo plan. I guess if you direct the film and star in it, whatever, you get to do whatever you want to do, whatever. But it is a tense / very funny film. There's situations where they're stuck in country and they're trying to they're planning, basically. They're going, all right, he brings them the script, he tells them, you're a cameraman, you're a beautician, you're a scout artist. All we have to do is just take you to a few locations just to establish the premise that you were here before we take you through customs and get you on a plane, where any slip up in any sense of the word could mean disaster. There's so many scenes where your attention is high, you're stressed, you're worried. These people are obviously stressed because they're trying to pull off this acting ability when clearly they just want to get the hell out of there. But then combined with that, you have Alan Arkin and John Goodman, who are just having the time of their lives coming up with the silliness of the Argo movie, including Alan Arkin's famous line from the movie, "Argo, fuck yourself," which is a lot of fun. Seeing that aspect of the film is what I actually enjoy more, because I think the amount of effort that went into making this a believable thing, a believable movie that was happening, is an incredibly ingenious plan and idea, and something that I never knew had ever been done until now. And seeing the amount of effort that all these people put in to rescue 6 strangers who they know nothing about, you can say, oh, it's patriotism and they have to because they're Americans, but it's still a lot, especially for Ben Affleck to go into this country and put on this facade when he could be executed at the drop of a hat because he slips up one time. He mispronounces the lead character on the script. He misremembers a scene. There's so much going on there. I really, really like Argo. I can rewatch it many times. I get the same feelings out of it, even when I know exactly what's going to happen. And it's a lot of fun too. It's not a miserable nightmare. It's tense. You know that everyone's probably going to make it out okay, but just seeing that journey from point A to point B is a lot of fun. I love Argo, number 6. And coming in at number 5, you got to love some Quentin Tarantino. We have Django Unchained. Django Unchained is not quite, but almost my favorite Quentin Tarantino film. Just losing out to Inglourious Bastards. But it is a very well-made homage to Western films and a great use of Tarantino's style and dialogue and direction, and a statement as well for racism as well, back in the old times as well as now. And great performances from leading actors Jamie Foxx and Christoph Waltz and Leonardo DiCaprio. Django Unchained tells the story of a man called Django, a slave essentially. He went through some serious issues and terribleness with his wife, who was taken from him. He ends up as part of a chain gang, a slave. Christoph Waltz shows up as Dr. King Schultz, who is a bounty hunter, who basically buys him, but also frees him, uses him, but also befriends him. He's the most likable character in this whole movie by far. He's great. Christoph Waltz is fantastic. They start bounty hunting together on the promise that eventually Schultz will take Django to find his wife, who is in the servitude of the most despicable slave owner of all time, Calvin Candy, played by Leonardo DiCaprio. The violence is top-notch for Tarantino. It's over the top and silly, but incredibly satisfactory as well, depending on who is the one having the violence thrust upon them. Jamie Foxx is great as Django, as this intimidating, super-heroic fighter for the people, while Christoph Waltz, as I said, he steals the scenes. He steals the show in pretty much every scene that he's in. He's one of the few pure, good, likable characters in the movies, and I really love his performance. Christoph Waltz and Quentin Tarantino together is just match made in heaven. DiCaprio is great as the villain. It's nice to see him in a really villainous role. Everyone knows the story of how he was acting and hurt his hand and was kept acting even though it was bleeding. I don't think it's his best performance, but it's definitely his most intense, intimidating. Samuel L. Jackson is despicably unlikable as his slave / sidekick / traitor, and he has quite a transformation as well. It looks nothing like Samuel L. Jackson, which is impressive. If you're here for Tarantino action, you got tons of it. If you're here for Tarantino dialogue, you got tons of it. If you're here for that sense of tension that he always builds up in certain scenes, where if someone says the wrong thing, all hell's gonna break loose. But if you also want the satisfaction of seeing Django just blow away some racist fuckheads, you are going to like Django Unchained. It is a mesmerizing watch from start to finish. I love it. Deserving of its spot at number 5. All right, coming in at number 4 is another personal favorite of mine, 7 Psychopaths. I may have mentioned in my highlight of the film In Bruges of my love for director Martin McDonagh's style of films and the way he does dialogue and characters and storytelling. He most recently, you may be familiar with his movie 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri, which was a hot contender at the Academy Awards. But 7 Psychopaths of the 3 may have moved its way up to be my favorite of the bunch. I thought it was In Bruges, but having rewatched 7 Psychopaths for the purpose of this ranking, I think it's marginally better in terms of the characters that are in here. In Bruges mainly focuses on Colin Farrell, Brendan Gleeson, and to an extent Ralph Fiennes. But 7 Psychopaths has the most wonderful trio in Colin Farrell, Sam Rockwell, and Christopher Walken. It is a zany film, but the basic premise of it is that Colin Farrell plays a struggling writer who's trying to write a script called 7 Psychopaths so he can make it in Hollywood. But he's struggling coming up with the actual 7 Psychopaths in his script. Meanwhile, for a series of unfortunate circumstances, his very, 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 very loyal best friend, played by Sam Rockwell, steals a dog that belongs to a psychotic person, a psychopath, if you will, played by Woody Harrelson, who wants his dog back and goes on a vengeful quest that also pulls into the mix Christopher Walken's character for very tragic circumstances. A lot of the film then ends up with Walken, Rockwell, and Farrell just hiding out in the desert, while Rockwell still insists on trying to help Farrell come up with his script. And it's basically discovering that the 7 psychopaths in this film are real life, basically the characters you are following. The script is sort of a 4-4 breaking thing. Is the script itself a story of what's going on for Colin Farrell right now? Is some of it made up? Is some of it loosely based on what's going on? Is Sam Rockwell manipulating events just so they can have content for the script? It's very intense performance from Sam Rockwell, possibly one of my favorite performances from him, but also Christopher Walken as well gives a very, very human, very moving, very powerful performance. There's a lot of emotion going on in his character's journey, which I think is great. Woody Harrelson, he does the job as the psychopath that's coming after them. But, I mean, if you've seen any Woody Harrelson, it's basically, he plays the same type of psychopath in everything he's in. But the dialogue, the cartoonishness of the film works also sort of like it's been pulled from a comic book, leading to situations where you think there's going to be showdowns and shootouts, but because it is real life, things don't go the way everyone expects them to, or in Sam Rockwell's case, wants them to, which can lead to some very silly, funny temper tantrums, but also some very violent, abrupt conclusions to certain scenarios and situations. 7 Psychopaths is not a long film, but you wish it were longer, just to really delve into the psyche of these characters and the madness that's going on behind their eyes and the motivations. It is really, really good. It would be higher, except that the 3 films above this have also the benefit of being part of franchises and already building on love for those characters that I already have had from previous films, reboots or otherwise. But for everything else, 7 Psychopaths tops it immensely in terms of my connection to the characters, my enjoyment for the story, my mix between tension and laughter. It's fantastic. If you haven't seen 7 Psychopaths, Jesus, definitely check it out. Deserving of its spot at number 4. Coming in at number 3, The Dark Knight Rises. I was extremely happy when I saw The Dark Knight Rises. I was anxious because, as we all know, and as I've mentioned before, The Dark Knight is nearly a perfect film from Christopher Nolan. The second installment in the Batman trilogy that basically just showed the madness and the world-burning psychoses that is Heath Ledger's Joker going up against Christian Bale's Batman, Gary Oldman's Commissioner Gordon, and Aaron Eckhart's Harvey Dent. Great film. I'll talk about that probably when I do my top 10 movies of 2008 more, but I've also addressed it heavily in a showcasing of Christopher Nolan movies, which is a separate episode you can check out if you want. The Dark Knight Rises, not just for me, but for everybody, had a lot to follow through on because it was supposed to be the conclusion to Christopher Nolan's trilogy, but also find a way to carry on from Heath Ledger's performance. As we all know, Heath Ledger unfortunately passed away, so the Joker just could not be in this movie. So how do you top that performance? Do you recapture the lightning in the bottle magic that Christopher Nolan had, or do you go in a completely different direction? And for the most part, I think he found a nice balance between keeping the style and the format similar to the previous 2 Batman films, but also introducing a whole new type of problem and situation for Batman to overcome, some new iconic villainous characters, and a finality to the story that you knew meant you would not be seeing Christian Bale's Batman again in his own film anytime soon. If you don't know the plot, it's basically carries on from The Dark Knight. After all of that, Bruce Wayne has been Batman for quite some time. He's completely delved into it. He's broken. He's got mental illness going on. His body is broken. Bruce Wayne himself does not exist. He is simply Batman. Then he comes across the imposing Bane, played by Tom Hardy, who was a former member of the League of Shadows. He comes to Gotham with the sole purpose of breaking Batman, both physically and mentally, which he does on both instances. Then with Batman out of the way, he basically brings Gotham to its knees. He has all the unfortunate and the criminals and the poverty. They all rise up against the rich, but not in a good way, because Gotham itself becomes a no man's land, a ground for crime running rampant, people getting assaulted in all instances, buildings being blown up, cops getting shot. in all instances, it is basically the Mad Max of Gotham City. Bruce has to find a way to rally and come back and be the Batman one last time to inspire hope for the city and take down Bane. Christian Bale, as always with the last ones, is great as Batman. He's not the best Batman that's ever been, but he works for the Nolan story stuff, as with all his supporting characters. Michael Caine is lovely as Alfred, even if he's not in it as much as I would like. Gary Oldman comes through as Gordon again. Morgan Freeman as Lucius Fox. And then we got our extra characters brought in, and I want to give special shout out to Tom Hardy's Bane. He had quite the task of proving his worth being in the shadow of Heath Ledger's Joker. But rather than mimicking anything about that performance, Tom Hardy's Bane is the exact opposite. He is intimidating, he is powerful, he is strong. He makes it very clear what he wants. He's not cackling with madness. He's smart as can be. He's very intelligent, and he is imposing. That scene will always stick with me where Batman confronts him for the first time in the sewers, and he just has absolutely no chance against Bane, who just beats him to a pulp while just quoting poetry at him with that iconic voice, which seems silly at first, but now on rewatching it as well, it is definitely unnerving. We also get Anne Hathaway as Catwoman, who's a great addition to it. She's much more faithful to Catwoman than Halle Berry's Catwoman, that's for sure. Plus Joseph Gordon-Levitt's great as Gordon's sidekick, John Blake. And even Marion Cotillard as well shows up here as businesswoman Miranda Tate. It is a long film, but it is intense. It keeps your engagement focused for the whole thing. And you do feel from the moment it starts to the last act that this is the final adventure of the Nolan Batman verse. It's fast-paced. There's a lot of moments as well where you take a moment there to process the stuff that's going on. You really see the struggle that Bruce Wayne has going through, that he has put into to be Batman, and him having to come to the terms that Batman can not run forever. He has to find a way to accept the fact that either it will kill him or he has to learn to let it go and embrace life, which is something he has never even considered. It's certainly not as good as The Dark Knight, but in terms of what it had against it and what people expected out of it, it absolutely delivered, so much so that I love The Dark Knight Rises. It could have been number one easy if it weren't for the other two films we are about to discuss. Because coming in at number 2 is Skyfall, the James Bond 23rd film and the 50th anniversary for James Bond. Skyfall is something special. Skyfall, I think, really revitalized the Bond franchise for the average moviegoer. I've talked about James Bond to death. I've got a whole series of episodes about it, so I probably won't talk about it too much here. But suffice it to say, basically what he was in the past meant that in the modern day sense, it's hard to do James Bond. Do you make him as he was before, which is essentially insulting to women and the attitude of that sort of stuff? Do you beef him up for a modern day, as with Casino Royale and Quantum of Solace? But of course, then you risk alienating the true Bond fans. Somehow Skyfall managed to land slap bang in the middle and satisfied everybody, while also giving a compelling action story and showing that there was still plenty of fire in James Bond to be an action hero franchise, a super spy franchise. Basically, it is Daniel Craig's third Bond film, where he is shot in a mission and then goes off the grid for some time, but is forced to pull back in when someone is basically gunning for Judi Dench's M. Someone has a revenge quest against her, which for some reason also wants to include James Bond in it. So he goes up against Raoul Silva in the end, played by Javier Bardem, one of the most impressive James Bond villains, one of the most imposing. It turns out that he is a former agent, just like Bond, who treated M as something of a mother. She burned him and left him to die. He survived, and now he's got this obsessed desire to enact revenge, not only on M, but on Bond, who he feels has replaced him. He's got some great monologues, some great action moments. He's got a nefarious plan, which again, if you think about it too much, requires absolute timing that you could probably pick apart, but it doesn't matter. Culminating to a final confrontation at Bond's old house, mansion, whatever you want to call it, Skyfall. As I said, Javier Bardem steals the show, but Daniel Craig also puts in an incredible performance as Bond. You really can see from this film that he treats Bond, the character, not as just a paycheck, but something he actually genuinely considers. And he really cares about revitalizing Bond for present day and not letting what he was in the past define him. Judi Dench gets the most she ever got to do as M in this film as well, and it's just Judi Dench. She's a class act. She's one of a kind. But furthermore, this film also managed to please the die-hard Bond fans by introducing all the characters that everybody remembered so fondly. Ben Whishaw is introduced as Q, the Gadget Master, and he has a great rapport with Bond. And even Naomi Harris, who I guess is not really spoiled because this movie's 10 years old, but she is a more confident, action-packed Miss Moneypenny than the Moneypenny of old. And even Ralph Fiennes joins the franchise in a role that he would continue to play for future installments. Skyfall is engrossing. Skyfall is action-packed. It has a great opening song by Adele as well, but it really hammers home the personal nature of Bond and M and Silver, and how, yeah, he's a super spy and he saves the day, but doing what he does and the things he goes through takes a toll on his character. Has he been manipulated by M all his life? Is this all his life ever will be? A lot of parallels to Bruce Wayne's Dark Knight Rises story as well. It is a great film and could easily have been number 2, except for personal bias, which we are about to discuss. Before I mention the number 1, of course, it's time for our honourable mentions. These are a lot of films. I'll stick to my usual 11, but all of them were at least fighting for that 10th spot on the list, and they're all great as well in their own rights. 21 Jump Street, a great comedy film from Channing Tatum and Jonah Hill based on the TV series. The Hunger Games, a dystopian world where kids compete to kill each other for the enjoyment of the rich. The Best Exotic Marigold Hotel, just a fun British film with a bunch of oldies just living together in a hotel. Men in Black 3, a resurgence for the Men in Black franchise and a great time travel story for Will Smith. Prometheus, I really like Prometheus. I think it deserves more love than it gets. It gets bogged down in the whole Alien franchise and what it should or shouldn't be, but at the end of the day, it's just a fun sci-fi film. The Amazing Spider-Man, it's not my favorite Spider-Man film, but Andrew Garfield is a great Spider-Man. Ice Age, Continental Drift, gotta love the Ice Age films, and this one was surprisingly funny and good with the crew taking on Monkey Peter Dinklage and his pirate crew. The Bourne Legacy, people sort of gave up on it before even seeing it, but I liked the spin-off take to seeing that there are other agents besides Jason Bourne. Jeremy Renner was great as Aaron Cross. Wreck-It Ralph, a great Disney film that balances Disney style with also video game nostalgia. Lincoln, a tour de force from Daniel Day-Lewis as Abraham Lincoln. And The Hobbit, an unexpected journey, though certainly not as good as the Lord of the Rings films as I mentioned in last week's, 2 weeks ago episode, or maybe it was last week, whatever. It's still a solid first installment of the Hobbit trilogy. Martin Freeman is a great Bilbo, great music, great return for director Peter Jackson. But, I mean, we kind of know, well, maybe you don't know if you don't know what movies came out each year, but there was never not a chance for any other film against number 1, The Avengers. Looking back on it, The Avengers isn't as good as some other Marvel films, and you could argue that Skyfall or The Dark Knight Rises or even Seven Psychopaths are better films. But when I go through all these movies, I can't just poo-poo it because I'm like, oh yeah, well, movies have changed. Looking at it as a rewatchable standpoint, looking at it as what it means for the Marvel Cinematic Universe, looking at it for what it means to me, having enjoyed it and seeing where the franchise came from and where it went, it's got to be The Avengers. It was at the time, the most important, pivotal movie for superhero franchises for sure. Taking the characters of Iron Man and Thor and Captain America, giving them their own standalone films while building this potential shared universe, and then risking it all by throwing them all into one movie together. It could have been a mess. It could have been a disaster. It could have been people fighting for the spotlight, other characters getting reduced to a point of nothing, a silly cartoon sort of thing. But what it turned out was an incredible movie, incredible action, a incredible example of how the chemistry between the lead actors was so great and how they could play in the sandbox together. I've already gone into immense detail in the Avengers in one of my Marvel Cinematic Universe episodes. Basic plot being, of course, that all the superheroes, Iron Man, Hulk, Thor, Captain America, Black Widow, and Hawkeye have to come together to stop Loki from leading an alien invasion to destroy planet Earth. They have very different opinions on how to be superheroes. They do not like each other in the beginning. There's constant fighting, but in the end, they rally together due to a tragedy of sorts. And by the end of it, they are a solid team. I can rewatch Avengers like twice a week if I wanted to. It's something about it. It's just pure fun. It's got that Marvel humor. It's got that sense of a world becoming bigger than you could possibly imagine, but the potential for more. All the performance in it are great. I particularly like the introduction of Mark Ruffalo as the new Bruce Banner. Bruce Banner. I thought he was great, and it was good to see Samuel L. Jackson finally get to sink his teeth into Nick Fury after being alluded at for so much. Great final action piece as well, actually getting to see all these characters together on screen. It just put a big smile on my face. I love the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and I love the Avengers, and to say that any other movie in 2012 I enjoyed more or I like more would be a lie. So yeah, there you go. The Avengers tops the bill of top 10 movies of 2012 at number 1. We are running out of MCU films going forward from this point. I expect for future rankings, Marvel may not dominate as much as it has for every other ranking I've done so far. But who knows? There's also X-Men and Spider-Man films that exist. We'll just have to wait and see. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you've enjoyed my ranking of the top 10 films for 2012. I'm happy that I've kept it at a relatively acceptable 40 minutes. And I will be back next week for a review, and I mean it this time. I'm going to be reviewing the new Pixar film Turning Red, which will have dropped on Disney+. I always have a high expectation for Pixar films, so I hope and expect that it will not disappoint. Until then, I love and appreciate you all. Thanks for listening, and as I said, have a think. What are your top 10 movies of 2012? You've been spliced in later. Adios, muchachos. I'll catch you next time.